Quiet Place became a successful movie franchise with a new innovative world haunted by an enemy that's very hard to combat: the noise you make. John Krasinski's films prove that silence doesn't mean lack of dialogue. He created a setting where the movies constantly communicate with the audience through body language and sign language. Here, horror comes quietly with few jump scares, but the fear works because you always know exactly when danger begins, the moment sound starts. So it was a matter of time until they made it in the video game industry with a game in the same world. The first movie tells a story of a family doing everything to be united. However, the game tells the story of Alex and how every step she makes, she sees herself more and more separated from her family. The player gets to live with her through the biggest tragedies of her life, but there is little time to get attached to her character, as there is very little dialogue in the game, and even when there is, it's a nothing burger, really. Her objective in the game is to travel to the coast for safety. She travels alone, and for the majority of the game with no one to talk to. The only way she communicates what she is feeling is by writing in her diary that can be missed if the player didn't seek to read, which is totally possible as it's very bland and uninteresting. The more interesting part of the story being told comes from the side stories that the player can read, scattered on each chapter, which Alex doesn't even make remarks about. As the game offers very few mechanical variations, the Survivor difficulty introduces the player to a mechanic that I've never seen before: the complete absence of explanation. Aside from a vague objective like getting to a specific place or finding a certain item, the game does absolutely nothing to teach the player what actions are possible, what the buttons do, how systems interact, or what actually happens when you ignore certain mechanics. Nothing is highlighted until you are already interacting with it. Nothing is contextualized and nothing is clarified, which results far more in confusion than in discovery. As someone playing for the first time, I got lost constantly and even managed to get stuck during the tutorial, simply because I didn't realize Alex could wall squeeze through narrow gaps, a traversal mechanic the game abuses ad nauseum, while never properly communicating that it exists. Every chapter outside of the tutorial follows the same formula of moving from point A to point B without a clear path. Progression is achieved by slowly advancing until a solution presents itself, at which point the game introduces an obstacle that can only be overcome in a very limited number of ways, usually involving a plank, a valve, or some other simple interaction that you've already seen dozens of times before. These interactions almost always require slow movement and crouching, because any unintended noise results in instant death. While there are areas that appear safe enough to walk normally or even run through, these moments are constantly undermined by invisible sound triggers like twigs snapping or boards creaking with no clear feedback for the player. Over time, the game completely exhausts its limited mechanics, repeatedly asking the player to quietly open doors, crawl through vents, squeeze between walls, or sneak through areas with the alien nearby, to the point where it stops feeling like tension and starts feeling like mechanic abuse. The alien itself is not dumb by any means, but its constant and predictable presence kills any sense of suspense very quickly. Because it appears so frequently and so reliably, there is rarely any tension surrounding its arrival, since you simply expect it to show up in almost every new area. It becomes borderline comical how often the alien enters a room at the exact same time as the player, forcing yet another slow stealth sequence that feels less like a dynamic encounter and more like a scripted interruption. When a mistake is made, there is no opportunity for recovery, no counterplay, no hiding mechanic, and no meaningful reaction window, because making a sound the game doesn't like immediately triggers an animation, where Alex starts struggling to breathe, the alien walks up, bitch slaps her, and you dead. This instant failure removes any tension and results in repetition that feels more frustrating than challenging. From a progression standpoint, the game offers almost no incentive to explore, as completing it only requires collecting items that directly help you reach point B, most commonly planks, and there are a lot of planks. Alex's asthma is presented as a potentially serious mechanic, suggesting that failing to manage her inhaler or medication could have severe consequences. But in reality, it works as little more than a visual impairment system, combined with a QTE. If stress levels get too high, the player must press a button at the right moment to avoid breathing too loudly, and failure simply results in another immediate death. There is no long-term resource management, no meaningful decision-making tied to the system, and no real reason to explore the environment, especially when the only collectibles are a toy from the first movie, mixtapes, and scattered lore files that expand on side stories. Ironically, these side stories are often more interesting than the main narrative, yet Alex herself never reacts to them, further disconnecting the player from her perspective, the character making the main story feel even more hollow. By the end of my experience, I had no fun playing this game and its repetition-heavy design. The lack of emotional engagement with Alex made the tragedies she experiences feel obligatory and not impactful, as if they existed solely because the story required dramatic moments rather than because they were earned through character development. Constantly meeting the alien drained the game's tension, and the over-reliance on instant failure states transformed difficulty into frustration over challenge. Despite dying frequently, the experience never felt demanding in a satisfying way, only confusing and punitive, to the point where I often did not understand why I had died. Ironically, the most difficult section for me involved no alien at all, requiring only careful traversal across boards, as there was the same invisible sound triggers repeatedly punishing movement, reinforcing the sense that the game's difficulty stems less from mastery and more from trial, error, and frustration.